From the first local station with news and high definition, this is 9 News Now.
Speech debate. Educators and parents across the country are divided on the airing of President Obama's speech to your children. Intelligence program. 2 local universities join forces to educate the next generation of America's intelligence community. Buying back licenses. Mid-Atlantic watermen are beginning to participate in a program aimed at increasing the blue crab population. Good morning. I'm Jessica Doyle in for Andrea Roan. Thank you for joining us. Today is Monday, September 7th. Thank you, Kim. Many are suffering during these tough economic times, including one lab that's dedicated to finding a cure for a very rare disease. So rare that a 14-year-old girl in Haymarket, Virginia is about 1 in 200 children in the country suffering from Nbia. That's known as neurodegeneration with brain iron accumulation. Here to talk about how the economy affects such research is Dr. Susan Hayflick. Brittany Leap is here, as well as her mom, Sandy. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much for
Well,
having us.
Sandy, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us about this disease and tell us about Brittany?
Well, you know, as you said, NBIA stands for neurodegeneration with brain iron accumulation. And I can tell you that's happened over time with Brittany. She was able to walk and talk and eat until she was 10 and a half. And shortly after her diagnosis, all those things kind of started going away. And so this is where we are, where she's in a wheelchair, she's on a feeding tube, she's unable to speak. And this happens to many of our children, sometimes at an earlier age. And it took us 8.5 years to get the correct diagnosis. Wow. And so that's why we really want to try to spread awareness about this disorder, because there may be other families out there suffering and not knowing and what to do. And so, and again, even though there isn't a treatment or a cure at this time,
that's where the doctor comes in.
This is where Dr. Hayflick comes in.
Well, doctor, tell us, is this a disease that is it hereditary? Do we know what causes it? And tell us about your research.
Yeah, so this is a genetic disorder. It's an inherited disorder. It's, as you noted, it's a very rare disorder. But if it affects your family, it's your whole world. As you can see, Brittany's medical care and daytime attention is huge. My laboratory is one of 2 in the U.S. that studies this disorder, and I became interested in it about 15 years ago when I met a family, very much like this family. They had 3 daughters affected with the disorder, and they actually became the basis for the research that we did, where we discovered the genetic basis for this disorder, and that sort of launched our interest in trying to find a cure for the disease.
Now, research, like so many things, runs on money. Brain power, money, research, all comes together. But the money has been disappearing for you. You're trying to raise funds right now to keep the program going. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so let me just back up and make the point that the money is disappearing for all research,
right.
that this is affecting research broadly. When it affects the cancer community or the community of people with brittle bones, osteoporosis, it's maybe felt a little bit less, although it's still a serious problem for those communities of common disorders researchers. In the rare disease community, there's usually only 1 or 2 laboratories that's studying any one disorder. If one of those laboratories goes away, if both of those laboratories go away, the research comes to a stop. And that is, it's a very sad thing for the families. It prevents any progress towards developing cures.
How much money do you need, and how quickly do you need it to keep your research going, to keep it progressing?
Yeah, so I have gotten some bridge funding from my university, which will carry us for about 4 or 5 more months. It costs about $10,000 to run my laboratory with 4 people in it. That's no support for myself, but for my technologists and for the supplies that we need to do the research. It takes about a year to get an NIH grant, but only about 10% of NIH grants are getting funded on the first cycle. So we're predicting we need 2 years. That's about $250,000 that we're trying to raise to keep the laboratory going long enough to get federal funding to carry this research forward.
How can people help you? How can they donate to your research institute to keep this research going?
Yeah, so there's an effort by the family organization, the Nbia Disorders Organization. They have a website, nbiadisorders.org, and there's an opportunity to support the organization through direct funding. It's also really valuable to talk about rare diseases and to get the word out to your congressional representatives that this is Maybe not something that affects your family, but that you understand that for those families that are affected, it's a very big deal, and that we all need to take responsibility for advancing research in this area.
Well, we appreciate you all for coming in today to talk about this and to talk about your research needs. Dr. Brittany and Sandy, thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Red line riders should expect more delays related to June's deadly accident. And speed cameras have become the latest target of vandals in our region. All that coming up.